Jin's blank gaze in the latest photo shoot made ARMY wonder. Is this part of the concept, or a neglected inner scream? Is HYBE turning a blind eye to Jin's most personal and wounded request? Why does the agency seem to be silent when the idol wants to postpone the album for one thing? His sick mother, Jin's blank stare, is not acting. HYBE allegedly ignored album delay request. Why are Jin's eyes so empty in his last photo shoot? Why is there no glimmer of light, even when the entire set is surrounded by expensive spotlights and smiles from the production team? Is that just part of the concept? Or is something deeper, quieter, and far more painful being hidden behind that camera spotlight? One photo, one look, and the whole fandom was suddenly transfixed. ARMY, known as a community full of warmth and empathy, immediately felt that something was not okay. But none of the official statements were released. Not a single sentence of explanation came from the agency's side. Just silent. And in that silence, questions began to surface. Is it true that Jin asked to postpone the release of his solo album? Is it true that he wants to wait for his mother, who is lying sick, to recover first? And if all that's true, the question is, why hasn't HYBE given an answer yet? Why is a request that sounds so human actually greeted with a gripping silence? An internal source who did not want to be named began to leak fragments of facts that increasingly made this heart choke. According to him, Jin has long conceived the concept of a solo album with sincerity. Every song, every lyric, even the visual atmosphere, everything is prepared not just for an ordinary comeback. He wanted this work to be a gift, not for himself, but for someone he loves most in this world, his mother. But behind all that, Jin realized his mother was now struggling. A sudden illness that makes the mother's body is not as strong as usual and slowly weakens their daily spirit. Jin, who is known as a cheerful figure, suddenly became more silent, more quiet, deeper. And in the midst of that difficult time, he had only one small request. Please, let me wait. I want this album to come out when my mom can see me smile completely. But reality is not as sweet as hope. Rumors circulated that the album release schedule had already been set in advance. The sponsorship contract has been signed. Advertising collaborations, promotional strategies, fan signing events, everything is already running behind the scenes. And in the midst of that schedule chaos, Jin's request might be considered disrupting the system. The question now is, would HYBE prefer a system to an artist's heartbreaking slowly? Why are they so slow to respond? Do they not see that Jin is now on the threshold between professionalism and deep personal wounds? Haven't they always claimed to be an agency that cares about the artist? One photo is a clue. One glance becomes a signal. Jin is not acting. It is not part of the promotional concept. It was an emotion he could no longer bear. A request that is not spoken through words, but through eyes that no longer shine. And behind it all, the ARMY began to move. The hashtags #RespectJin and #LetJin began to resonate on social media. They demand transparency. They asked for an explanation. But until now, HYBE remained silent. Even too silent, is it possible? HYBE is weighing the financial impact greater than the emotional impact of the artist? Will the decision to postpone the album only be considered if the public pressure is already strong enough? In various previous interviews, Jin has always presented himself as a professional figure. He rarely complains, always smiles, even when he is clearly exhausted. But this time it's different. He can no longer pretend. He can no longer wear a mask. His mother is sick. And the world of entertainment, with all its glitter, suddenly becomes so insignificant compared to the sound of her mother's breathing in the nursery. Is it wrong for a child to want his mother to see his successes from a healthy place, not from a hospital bed? Why does this simple demand seem to be a burden on the industrial system? Will HYBE finally speak out? Or will they continue to let the genie work in the shadow of a wound that she herself is unable to cover? And if they really impose an album release schedule as planned, what will happen to Jin? Will this be one of the emotional wounds that will forever remain in his career? ARMY knows. They see. They feel that this time, it's not about a comeback. It's not about promotion. It's not about sales numbers. It's about a human named Kim Seokjin who just wants his mother to see him shine calmly, with pride, in good health. If HYBE still has a human side, then the wisest decision does not lie in schedules or contracts, but on one thing, the heart, and now the world waits. Jin is waiting. We're all waiting. Will HYBE listen, or just ignore it for the sake of a number? One day after the photo shoot, rumors began to spread secretly among HYBE's internal staff. Some photo editors began to voice their unrest. There is something that cannot be hidden, even by the most advanced Photoshop. Jin's eyes are too empty, one of them said in a conversation that leaked to a limited online community. Usually he can turn the camera over with just one blink, but now it's as if he's no longer there. And this is the beginning of chaos that slowly rots from within. Some members of the production staff, who were initially so enthusiastic about the album project, began to show signs of anxiety. Some files are postponed, some agendas are changed for no apparent reason. And one by one, questions began to echo, not only from the ARMY, but from the people directly involved in the production. Is Jin really ready? And if not, why did the agency force it? Jin's inner conflict becomes even more apparent when he, in a private conversation with one of his old colleagues who no longer works at HYBE, expresses his feelings. "I can't sing these songs like I used to," she says softly. "Not because I lost my voice, but because I lost my spirit. I couldn't sing lyrics about hope, while the only hope in my life was still lying weak and helpless in the hospital." Is this what you call professionalism? Or emotional abandonment? A person in the position of a genie has everything: fame, wealth, global influence, but remains helpless when reality forces him to choose between duty and love. And when he chooses love, the world he works in looks at him coldly and thoughtfully. When the ARMY began to highlight HYBE's movements, the agency seemed to close access to information. There is no clarification. There is no denial. No press statement. Just shut up. And behind that silence, voices of suspicion began to grow into anger. Is HYBE waiting for the storm to subside? Or do they just not consider this a storm at all? Some longtime BTS fans claim to feel déjà vu. They've seen this kind of indifference in the past, when agencies seemed too focused on numbers, sales, and quarterly targets. But this time, it's not just reputation that's at stake. The emotional life of a human being. And in the midst of all that chaos, the genie returned to the recording room. Shut up. Not much to say. He completed vocal takes on demand. But the producer noted something unusual. Usually the genie can give an energy that is contagious throughout the room. But this time, his voice is heard empty. Empty. The same word repeatedly appears from different sides. Empty not because of lack of power, but it's empty because it's too full of wounds that can't be shared. The next day, Jin again accompanied his mother to the hospital. He spent